August 17th, 1959. Castel Gandolfo. The summer residence of the Pope sits quiet above the lake. The cicadas have gone silent. Inside the papal apartments, the heavy wooden door has been locked. The shutters are drawn against the afternoon heat. On a small writing table, beneath a single lamp, rests an envelope. It's yellowed by 16 years of waiting. The wax seal has not been broken. The handwriting on the outside is the careful slanted script of a Portuguese Carmelite nun named Lúcia dos Santos. The man standing before it is Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli, Pope John XXIII. He is 77 years old. He is known throughout the world as the Smiling Pope, the Grandfatherly Pope, the Pope who would soon open the Second Vatican Council and shake the foundations of the Church. But in this moment before this envelope, the smile is gone. His hand trembles slightly as he reaches for the seal, and then he stops. He withdraws his hand. He turns to the only other person in the room, his personal secretary, a young Monsignor named Loris Capovilla, and he says quietly, "I am waiting to read it with my confessor." The envelope is placed back upon the table. The door remains locked, and the secret that would terrify every pope for the next 4 decades remains for a few more days, unread. This is the story of that envelope, the story of what was inside, the story of 7 popes, 6 of whom touched it, read it, and chose silence, and the story of the 7th Leo XIV, the Pope of our own days, the Pope elected on the 8th of May in the year of our Lord, 2025, of whom many faithful are now asking the question that has haunted Catholic hearts for 65 years. Did he at last bring it to light? If this story moves something in your soul, leave a quiet prayer in the comments for the souls of all the popes who carried this burden. They were, all of them, men. To understand why 1960 mattered, we must return to the cave near Aljustrel, to the rocky hills of Cova da Iria, to 3 small Portuguese children kneeling in the dust on the 13th of July, 1917. Lucia, 10 years old, her cousin Francisco, 9, his sister Jacinta, 7. The Lady of Light had appeared to them now 3 times. She had promised a miracle. She had asked for prayers and sacrifices for sinners. And on that July afternoon, she did something she had never done before. She showed them a vision in 3 parts, and she entrusted them with what would forever after be called the secret. The first part was the vision of hell, a sea of fire. Demons and souls in human form, transparent and burning, tossed by flames. The children would later say it was the most terrifying moment of their young lives, and that the only reason they did not die of fear was because the lady had promised to take them to heaven. The second part was a prophecy of the Second World War, a warning about Russia, a request that Russia be consecrated to her immaculate heart. If this was done, there would be peace. If not, Russia would spread her errors throughout the world, raising up wars and persecutions. And then there was the third part which the lady asked Lucia to keep hidden in her heart and to reveal only when heaven gave the sign. Francisco and Jacinta died young, claimed by the Spanish influenza, just as the lady had foretold. Lucia alone carried the third part of the secret into adulthood. She entered the Dorothean Sisters. Later she became a Carmelite at Coimbra. And in October of 1943, gravely ill, ordered under obedience by Bishop da Silva of Leiria, she sat down at her wooden desk and wrote the third part of the secret on a single sheet of paper. She folded it, she sealed it in an envelope, and on the outside she wrote that the envelope was not to be opened by order of heaven until the year 1960, because she said, by then it will appear clearer. That single line, by then it will appear clearer, would become the most haunted sentence of the 20th century. Why 1960? Why not 1950 or 1980 or never? Lúcia herself, when pressed, would say only that this was the will of Our Lady. The envelope was carried to Rome. It was placed in the secret archive of the Holy Office. It waited. Pope Pius XII, who reigned during those years, was given the opportunity to read it. He chose not to. He left it sealed. He left it for his successor. And so we return to that summer day at Castel Gandolfo, August of 1959. John XXIII, the new Pope, the Pope of warmth and openness, the Pope who would soon throw open the windows of the church to let in the fresh air, as he himself put it. The envelope is brought to him by Monsignor Philippe of the Holy Office. The seal is unbroken, and John XXIII, the smiling Pope, does not smile. He waits, he prays. A few days later, in the quiet of the papal apartment, he opens it. He reads the 25 lines written in Lúcia's careful hand. Monsignor Capovilla, his secretary, would testify many years later in a certified note dated the 17th of May, 1967, to what happened next. The Pope read the text. He read it slowly. He read it more than once. And then he handed the envelope back to Capovilla, and he gave the secretary a single instruction. Right on the envelope he said that the Pope, having read it, has decided not to publish it, but to leave the decision to one of his successors. Capovilla wrote the words. The envelope was resealed. It was returned to the archive. And John XXIII, the Pope of openness, the Pope of windows thrown wide, never spoke publicly of what he had read. Those who were close to him reported only a phrase that he was said to have uttered in the days afterward. The phrase has been repeated and disputed and passed for 65 years. It does not concern his reported to have said, "My pontificate," as if to say, this is for another pope, as if to say, the hour has not yet come, as if to say, the burden I have just lifted from this envelope I now place back upon the shoulders of a pope who is not yet born. In February of 1960, just months after John XXIII read The Secret, the Portuguese news agency announced to the world that the Third Secret of Fatima would, most probably, remain forever under seal. The faithful around the world were stunned. The year of the promised revelation had arrived, and Rome had chosen silence. Whispers began. Speculation spread. Some said the secret foretold nuclear annihilation. Some said it foretold a great apostasy within the church. Some said it described a future pope dressed in white, walking through a ruined city, struck down at the foot of a great rough cross. John XXIII would die in 1963, his council still in session, the secret still sealed in the archive. He took whatever burden he had read to his grave, and the envelope passed to the next pope. Giovanni Battista Montini, Paul VI, was elected in June of 1963. He was a different kind of man than his predecessor. Where John XXIII was warm and pastoral, Paul VI was intellectual, reserved, melancholic. He carried the weight of the council to its conclusion. He oversaw the great upheavals of the 1960s within the church. And on the 27th of March 1965, in the company of Archbishop Angelo dell'Acqua, his substitute, he asked for the envelope to be brought to him. What Paul VI read that day We do not know exactly. He left no public testimony. He left no notes for history. But we know what he did. He returned the envelope to the secret archive. He did not publish it. He did not speak of it. And in February of 1967, on the eve of the 50th anniversary of the apparitions, he gave Cardinal Ottaviani the task of informing the faithful, in his name, that the secret would not be disclosed. That same May of 1967, Paul VI traveled to Fatima as a pilgrim. He stood before the great basilica. He prayed at the spot of the apparitions, but those who watched him closely noticed something strange. He did not visit Capezzo, where the children had seen the angel of peace. He did not visit Valinhos. He did not even walk the few meters to the Capellinia, the small chapel built upon the very spot where the lady had appeared. To some, this was the sign of a man who had been shaken by what he had read. To others, it was the sign of a man who simply preferred to keep the mystical at a respectful distance. Jean Guiton, the French philosopher who knew Paul VI personally, would later write that the Pope had what he called a generic aversion to seers, and considered that the Church had no need of these things, to which an exaggerated importance is attributed. But the envelope remained, and Paul VI, like John XXIII before him, took whatever he had read into the silence of his own prayer. When Paul VI died in August of 1978, the conclave elected Albino Luciani, the Patriarch of Venice, who took the name John Paul I. He was warm, smiling, gentle, the Pope of the September smile. He reigned for only 33 days. But before his election, there was a moment that the faithful would remember forever. On the 11th of July 1977, Cardinal Luciani had traveled to Coimbra, to the Carmelite convent, and had met privately with Sister Lúcia herself. Sources close to the meeting reported that the cardinal emerged shaken. Some say she predicted his election to the See of Peter. Some say she predicted the brevity of his reign. The cardinal himself drafted a report of the meeting, and Sister Lúcia later read the report, confirmed every word, and signed it. We do not know with certainty whether Luciani, in those 33 days of his pontificate, was given the envelope to read. The Vatican has never published the testimony, but we know this. A pope met privately with the woman to whom heaven had entrusted the secret. He was shaken. He was elected. He reigned for 33 days. And then he was gone, and the envelope passed to a pope who would, more than any other, carry it into the light. Karol Wojtyła, John Paul II, took up the Petrine ministry in October of 1978. He was a Polish pope, a pope who had lived under both Nazi and communist persecution, a pope whose devotion to Our Lady was the spine of his entire life. His motto, Totus tuus, totally yours, was a Marian consecration, and early in his pontificate, the envelope was brought to him. He read it. Like his predecessors, he resealed it. Like his predecessors, he did not immediately publish it. And then, on the 13th of May, 1981, the anniversary of the first apparition at Fatima, John Paul II stood in St. Peter's Square, riding slowly through the crowd, when a man named Mehmet Ali Akka raised a pistol and fired. The bullet struck the Pope. He fell. He should have died. He survived. And in the months that followed, John Paul II would say, with a conviction that never wavered for the rest of his life, that it was the hand of Our Lady of Fatima that had deflected the bullet from his heart. He had the bullet placed in the crown of her statue at the Cova da Iria. He visited Fatima 3 times. He met repeatedly with Sister Lúcia. and in the year 2000, on the 13th of May, he beatified Francisco and Jacinta at the very site of the apparitions. It was on that day that he announced that the Third Secret would at last be published. The publication came on the 26th of June 2000. Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, then prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, presented to the world the text Sister Lúcia had written in 1944. It described an angel with a flaming sword, a great mountain, a city half in ruins, a bishop dressed in white walking through that city, trembling, his face marked with pain. And then the bishop in white struck down at the foot of a great rough cross, killed by a group of soldiers who fired bullets and arrows at him, and with him a multitude of bishops, priests, religious and lay people, all martyred. And two angels gathering the blood of the martyrs and sprinkling with it the souls who were making their way to God. Cardinal Ratzinger, in his theological commentary, offered an interpretation. The vision, he wrote, was not a literal prophecy of a single future event. It was a symbolic vision of the suffering of the Church across the entire 20th century. The century of the martyrs, the century of 2 world wars, the century of the gulags and the death camps and the persecutions in Mexico, Spain, China, the Soviet bloc. The bishop in white, he suggested, could be understood as representing all the popes who suffered in the 20th century, and in a particular way, the pope who had been shot in St. Peter's Square on the very anniversary of the first apparition. Ratzinger's key word for the entire vision was the triple cry that Lúcia herself had heard: penance, penance, penance. And yet, even after the publication, the questions did not end. Sister Lúcia herself was asked repeatedly whether the entire secret had been revealed. In her later years, she gave answers that were brief and obedient, and to some, ambiguous. Monsignor Capovilla, the last surviving witness from that day at Castel Gandolfo, lived until 1916, when he was 100 years old, and to his final days he insisted that what was published in 2000 was indeed the full text he had seen in the envelope. Others, including the Italian journalist Antonio Socci and the late Father Nicholas Gruner, argued that the portion remained unpublished. A few lines, a direct word from the lady, an interpretation of the vision spoken in her own voice. The debate has never been settled. It cannot be settled, perhaps, by those of us outside the archive. Benedict XVI, who, as Cardinal Ratzinger had written the commentary, became Pope in 2005. He had, of all the popes, the deepest theological familiarity with the secret. He spoke of it often. He defended the publication. He insisted there was nothing hidden. And yet, when he traveled to Fatima in May of 2010, he said something that astonished those who were listening. He said that those who think the prophetic mission of Fatima is concluded deceive themselves. He said the suffering of the Church, which the vision portrays, comes from within the Church itself, from the sin that exists within the Church. He spoke of the need for purification, the need for repentance, the need to read the secret not as a closed book of the past, but as a mirror held up to the Church of the present. Pope Francis, who succeeded Benedict in 2013, spoke less of Fatima than his predecessors, though he consecrated the world, and in 2022, the nations of Russia and Ukraine, to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. He did not return to the question of the secret. He left it where John Paul II had placed it. And so we come to our own days, to the 8th of May, 2025. To the white smoke rising above the Sistine Chapel, to the loggia of St. Peter's, and the announcement of the name, Robertus, Cardinal Robert Prevost, an American by birth, a missionary in Peru for many years, and Augustinian, the new Bishop of Rome. He took the name Leo, the 14th Pope to bear it, Leo XIV. The faithful around the world in the hours and days that followed began to ask questions. Why the name Leo? The last Pope, Leo XIII, had been the Pope of the Great Prayer to St. Michael the Archangel, the prayer he had composed after a vision of the spiritual warfare to come in the 20th century. Was the new Pope signaling a return to that vision? A return to the prophetic, a return to Fatima. From the very first days of his pontificate, Leo XIV showed a deep, unwavering devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. His homilies turned to her. His public acts of piety include her. He has spoken of the need for prayer, the need for penance, the need for the Church to read the signs of these times. And then the question began to spread. Quietly at first, in Catholic publications and on devotional sites. Then more openly. Will Pope Leo XIV address the Fatima issue? Will he speak of the secret? Will he, after 65 years of silence and partial revelation and theological commentary, bring something new to light? Some have gone further. Some have said that Leo XIV has already begun to do so. That in his quiet way, by his choice of name, by his Marian devotion, by his willingness to speak of penance and the sufferings of the Church from within, he is opening a door that previous pontificates had only set ajar. Whether this is the case, no one outside the Apostolic Palace can yet know with certainty. The full unfolding of his pontificate is still ahead of us. We are reading a chapter as it is being written. But this we can say. For the first time since John XXIII placed the resealed envelope back into the archive in August of 1959, a Pope has taken the see of Peter, who seems entirely unafraid of the prophetic, who seems to understand that the message of Fatima is not a closed file but an open wound, who seems prepared, perhaps, to do what every Pope since 1960 has hesitated to do, to speak of the secret not as something hidden, not as something already explained, but as something still calling to the Church, still asking for penance, still asking for prayer, still asking in the words Lúcia heard at the very heart of the vision, for the consecration, for the reparation, for the conversion of hearts. And so we are left, you and I, the listeners and the faithful, at the same place where every Pope since 1960 has stood. Before an envelope, before a vision, before a lady whose voice has not been silenced by all the silence of all the archives in Rome. The secret terrified them. They read it and they prayed and they chose, each of them, the silence they believed heaven was asking of them. Leo XIV stands now where they stood, and the faithful around the world are watching, praying, asking. What did Lúcia mean? What did the children see? What did John XXIII read on that summer afternoon at Castel Gandolfo? What did Paul VI carry to his death? What did John Paul II understand when the bullet did not kill him? And what, in our own days, is heaven asking of the Pope who took the name Leo? The envelope is no longer sealed, but the meaning, the deepest meaning, the meaning that even 6 popes could not bring themselves to speak of openly, may only be unsealed now. By the prayers of the faithful, by the penance of the Church, by the eyes that finally agree to see what the children saw. A bishop in white walking through a ruined city, climbing a steep mountain, kneeling at the foot of a great rough cross. And above him, the lady, still patient, still pleading, still waiting for her children to listen. Pray for Pope Leo, pray for the Church, pray for the souls who are making their way to God. The secret was never about fear. It was always, in the end, about the same thing every word from heaven is about. It was about love, and the cost of love, and the cross at the top of the mountain, and the mother standing beneath it, watching, waiting for us